This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good morning, welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. I'm Caroline Keep. Today I'm joined by Cauchi to discuss the report on the impact of teaching on personal relationships. So listen in and let us know what you think. Give us some tweets or some messages and we'll get into it.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good morning. Welcome to Teacher Talk Radio. So I caught up with Cauchi. Many of you know her from Rise magazine. She's a former teacher and she's just done a report on the impact of relationships if you're a teacher. So the official report is called The Impact of Teaching on Relationships. And I just wanted to have a quick discussion with her about what was going on with that. So if you don't know her, you can find her at Really School. And I figured we'd record this one. So I'm just going to give you a bit of the interview and just let us know kind of what you think. We discuss all kinds in this one. What it's like to be a teacher, what it's like to manage your workload, how your friends see it, how your family see it, and what kind of the constraints and things we can change to help people have good, meaningful relationships outside of the school with the people that they care about, alongside a teaching workload, which can be quite intense. So I'm hoping you enjoy this. It'll come in two parts. So let's start with part one. Report. I won't give you kind of like the big rundown of the bio, because I'm pretty sure that I can put one together that will hopefully do you justice in the beginning of the show, for the simple reason that if you don't know Kat, where have you been? Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously, where have you been? Editor of Rise magazine, part of Net Support, just all round wonderful person. So I'll give you the breakdown at the beginning, I'm sure, but I wanted to get you on to talk about this report that you've just launched, the impact of teaching on personal relationships. It's just come out by Net Support. If you've not read it, go see it, read it thoroughly, because it has some incredible statistics in it. So I know a little bit about this because I was in the early stages of this when I think me and Kat, along with a lot of the Rise members who have been contributing to Rise magazine, had like a brief discussion in our Twitter thread, didn't we, about do personal relationships get affected by teaching? And I went the really crass route of saying, does your sex life get affected by teaching, and put out a Twitter poll? Yeah, and like, how did that go? And it came back overwhelmingly yes. And I said to Kat, this is something that maybe you should look at, because it looks like it's a big deal. And Kat, being just absolutely amazing, just took it by the horns and just ran with it. So tell us, how did you first find getting into that that area, and how did you first kind of get your hooks into this, you know, and how did it go? For the simple reason that the report is just brilliant, and it does give a whole bunch of kind of really interesting things going on in teaching, I think, that we really need to reflect on as a profession. So how did you first find it, trying to get us all to talk about our personal relationships?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was actually really surprised how open everyone was in the contributors group initially, which kind of, I think, was really sparking the fuel for the fire of actually starting this report.
Yeah.
And then I did an anonymous poll on Twitter, because I kind of figured if you take kind of that like that, I started speaking to teachers about their experiences to get a bit more understanding, and looking into like generally teacher well-being, stress, all that kind of stuff, to find what those pressure points were. and put it all together. As well as I was really eager that we needed to get some action points in there as well. So again, went back to experts for that because it has to change. The results are quite frightening, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly just frightening report. It's like, you know, the numbers are just outstanding. Do you know what I mean? It's like 80% of us saying teaching has negatively impacted our personal relationships in such a wide demographic as well, and such a massive poll. And you kind of dig down into some of the reasons that you think this. I mean, do you want to have a brief discussion? As I said, please do read the report about what came out about what are the reasons for these kind of negative impacts on teachers in the personal relationships.
Yeah, so there were a few things. So one of the key drivers really was stress, but there were specific areas that were mentioned more than others for this. So things like excessive workload, demands from managers, struggling to get that work-life balance, and lack of trust from management as well. That was all really kind of key in it. And then the kind of the burnout aspects, and then you've got actual mental health beyond that. So you've got your anxiety, depression, all of these things negatively impact on relationships, and unfortunately can be quite prevalent in teaching. I mean, we're looking at 77% of teachers, according to the Teacher Wellbeing Index, said they've experienced behavioural, psychological, or physical symptoms due to their work. So that's quite huge. And then over half is considered leaving the profession due to their mental health and well-being. But on top of that, because teaching is such a, it's such a passion profession, and the people that get into it obviously really care about education, and really understand the importance of it in the lives of pupils. There's a real attachment there and an emotional investment, and that can cause that kind of stress that impacts on relationships as well. It's a lot harder to find that balance, that cut-off point, to really prioritize those relationships when you're struggling with that, and when you're becoming, you know, carers on top of teachers as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I had this moment where I kind of initially brought it up because I'd looked at it and I thought to myself, you know, when I stopped teaching full time, I went to kind of part time and supply. And it was when I brought my daughter back from Iceland. Most of you know, if you listen to me, I'd shipped mine out to Iceland. And I had this dawning realization that for the entire time that I led GCSEs, my daughter was out of the country. And I thought to myself, could I have done it? You know, and being, you know, as you know, an autistic ADHD teacher it's hard enough as is. And I really felt like when I first started teaching, I couldn't do great parenting and great teaching. Not as an ADHD teacher, it was just so intense. And obviously, I wasn't diagnosed then, so I didn't know a lot of the kind of support that I needed. And
which, of course, doesn't help. Obviously.
No, it doesn't help, obviously, at all. And I just felt like the pressure was just so great. At one point, I was like, I can't parent well. Just like, I can't do this job and parent well. And obviously, I'm lucky that we're all a very good family. And it was around the time that we were considering sending Aurora over there. So I sent her out and thought I'll bring her back, you know, for the A levels. They can have the high school years. So, and that helped a little. But then I do find that as consequence, the work just became your life. And it was just, you know, every single aspect of your life in its entirety. It's just dominated when you're leading a department. It's just non-stop. And,
yeah, absolutely. And that can become an excuse as well. So if there are issues within your relationships, you then kind of get the opposite thing where people are kind of purposely diving more into their work as like an escapism. So, you know, it can get really unhealthy.
And I think that's exactly what happened. Instead, it was like, God, I'm really struggling. I can't do any of this. I'm so exhausted. I'm dying. I'm going to have to make some hard choices that then I made that then I wasn't really happy about. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't happy about it at all. And, you know, and instead, I kind of chalked it up and turned back up, but then I threw myself into my work. Because then it was like, well, you know, if you're going to do this, you better make it worth it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just burned me out in the end. And, it, you know, and then my diagnosis came about. So I understood what was much better for maintaining a, you know, a healthy lifestyle for me. You know, now I'm kind of, I have a good work-life balance. And I don't get me wrong, I love to teach, I do. And I love to teach kids, and I love doing a good job of it, but I just find for me it's just so intensive to do it full time. I just can't manage it. And to be honest, especially when you are in those leadership positions, it just becomes, it's hard. And I think for me, when we hit COVID, that was it then. It was like,
that's been a huge stressor for a lot of teachers, hasn't it? You know.
And at that point, I'd already dropped down into part-time. And then at that point, I kind of made the decision now that this you've got to kind of step back from this and then maybe consider just supply. And it was like, fine. And I took the time for myself during those years, but I kind of, you inevitably feel the guilt about it all, don't you? You know, there's so much guilt at stopping or leaving teaching. I really wish we didn't.
That's really hard as well. That just adds to the pressures, doesn't it?
I really wish we wouldn't do that, I think, because to be honest, for teachers like me who are like, you know, really on the spectrum, it's like sometimes I do need to take like time out, and that doesn't mean that I won't go back, or it doesn't mean that I won't part-time, or it doesn't mean that I won't supply. It doesn't mean, you know, there's not a month that since I've left, you know, my last school that I haven't been in a classroom. So, you know, to be honest, I just feel like I wish we'd normalise those kinds of breaks a bit more.
Yeah, I think they just need to be more flexible, don't we? And also kind of look at roles in different ways. Stop kind of focusing on like the ladder approach for progress and think about different ways that people can be involved in education. You know, that flexible working is really missing. It's that, you know, you're here every day, term time, everything's got to be done. That's that. And it's just this constant like on, off, on, off. And you can't really switch off because it's just it's too sudden. You need time to process during your actual breaks.
I mean, I was really lucky. I had a great school. So when I did when I went to part-time, I had opportunities to be able to kind of work elsewhere in the days that I was off, so that I could kind of just get a break from the teaching grind and do other things for my professional development, which was wonderful for me. But also I just found that, you know, having the part-time, the problem is with that is that then is it part-time? You know what I mean? Because that's the other thing that, you know, you drop into part-time because you're really struggling to manage the full-time and it's burning you out. And then you drop into part-time thinking, and really it's a full-time job just with part-time pay. And, you know, that can happen as well, I think.
Yeah, of course.
So I think, you know, you've kind of got to be really firm about, you know, part-time hours if you are going part-time. But I will suggest if you can afford to, because I know cost of living is killing everybody. So fundamentally, many don't have that luxury. But if you can and you're finding it, I found it really good for me to kind of readdress my life. And then actually enjoy teaching again. Because
it should be enjoyable. It should be the best job. And a lot of people do really enjoy it as well. And it shouldn't be that people have to leave to have a work-life balance, or, you know, have to work part-time. If people want to, that's great, but it should be more manageable.
Well, we shouldn't have to, for our own mental health, it shouldn't be a thing where we have to leave to go part-time. You know, that's a frightening reality when a lot of us say that. And I just think sometimes you look at it and you think to yourself, what can I possibly do? It just, I think, you know, there's not a teacher alive that I don't know that's not cried in a bathroom somewhere. You know what I mean? Or been upset in a corridor, or had a complete freak out. I had a freak out just before I left. It was like, you know, and a bad one, because I'd just been diagnosed as autistic, and then everything just came upon me, and it was just awful. And it's like, we've all had bad days, bad weeks, but I think for me sometimes it becomes, you know, a bad month, you know, a bad 6 months. And then you kind of like, this is not working. This isn't just a bad day or two. This is like, I'm so exhausted, I can't stand. And I remember some of the first years that I did it, you know, this is specifically for all you NQTs out there, honest to God, if you're feeling it, I can totally and utterly understand you. Go and find resources and use other expert teachers' resources. Do not sit there trying to create it all yourself. And a lot of the push when I first started teaching was, you've got to create everything yourself. And you know, that's what makes you, I mean, I look back now and laugh at some of the stuff that we did then. But like, you know, that was the push, and you know, you create things and you individualize it and you carousel it, and you know what I mean? And like everything is like, you know, this wonderful experience of teaching, and it's not just the content or the knowledge rich, it's, you know, thinking every single detail. I had times on my lesson plans. Do you know what I mean? It was
I
like,
remember having to put times on as well, which was just bonkers.
It's
Because how can
bonkers.
you know how long you're going to need to spend on something? What if the kids don't get it, or they whiz through it, or
I
they...
know.
It's just,
And
it
then
just
you'd have the
doesn't
dual
work.
problem of, if you stick to time, then it's what opportunity did they get to expand? And if you
Yeah.
don't stick to time, it's, well, you didn't quite follow your lesson plan. And it's like,
Mm.
oh my God, go away. But
Yeah.
I remember doing that and being an NQT exhausted. I was so
Yeah.
exhausted. Like, I was just so exhausted.
Oh.
And I remember saying to my fellow NQTs, like, because I was older when I did teacher training and I had come from industry, I was like, this is madness. Like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
This is mad. I remember saying to all of them, why don't we just all have one giant Google Drive and we just all
Yeah.
upload all of our resources to one giant Google Drive together? And then that way we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel.
Exactly.
And we literally did that for years in the beginning. And I remember a newbie teacher who had trained with. I remember it was about 6 months after, and I was in my QTS year, and they turned around and said, I can't face going into school tomorrow. I can't face planning. I can't face doing this anymore. I've had enough. I can't face it. I've got this amount of planning to do, and I just can't face this any longer. I've planned non-stop every day for like the last 3 months, and I've still not got this GCSE right. And I was like, right, what is it you're trying to plan? And it was like this unit, and I was like, I have one, take it. And literally, and I think it just, she said later on to me, it just saved her just not having to immediately quit teaching. And you know, this is why I think, you know, things like moving away from this idea that you've got to do it all yourself. And that we can't share resources, we can't, things like Oak, or you can't use stuff that's online, or that you can't use others' expertise. That has been a grateful shift since I first started teaching.
It has definitely improved, thankfully.
So it's changed a lot, but I think there are certain things that just do put pressure on you as a teacher. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I have the, you know, in this report you talk a bit about the difference between personal relationships and like your partner and your kids or your family or your friends. You know, can you tell us a bit more about what kinds of things you found in there?
Yeah, so that was really interesting. So we kind of found that generally most of the respondents said that all of their, or a mixture of their personal relationships were being affected. But then when we looked at like intimate relationships, we had about 73% of teachers that said it had specifically impacted on a relationship with like a partner or another kind of intimate relationship like that, which is huge. And I guess it makes sense because if they're kind of your closest person in life, they're the one you're coming home to, bringing all that stress home with you, you know. And I think it does also link to the survey that you did as well, which is mentioned in there too, because obviously it's that kind of that physical side of the relationship too.
Yeah. You know, in that
pure
case,
exhaustion.
Yeah, it's just I'm too exhausted. Do you know, and I think you probably see this, especially if you've got teacher couples, all you teacher couples out there, please let us know for this one. Couples, how does that work? Please send me private DMs, me or Kat. Tell us, how does your personal relationship or your intimate relationship work if you're both teachers? Because, like, I'm married to an academic, as you know, so they understand how hard this is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
I mean, it's good from the understanding perspective.
But I'd probably say it's bad from the time perspective, because honestly, sometimes it'll be like, we will work so much and then be like, when did we last see each other? I don't know. We've been in a planning hole for like how long? When did we last go out? We don't know. And there's some acceptance there that they understand the constraints of the job. But you know, even my husband will turn around and say, I wouldn't do your job if you paid me all the money in the world, Kaz. You know what I mean? And it's like, and he'll come in and do things with me in schools. We went up to Matt Jessup's school not so long ago, and he was like, how do you do this every day? How do you do this every day? I was like, And that's with somebody with just a mild bit of understanding. But if you've got somebody who's in a completely different role, working a 9 to 5 that they can put down, I do not know how that would go.
That is difficult. I mean, it was like kind of like with my husband, that was difficult for him to understand, because it was like, but you're finished, like you finished work, like
you don't
haven't finished work.
No,
because work's never actually finished.
No,
that's hard. And then I think it's those crunch times can be difficult as well for people. So like when you've got you're coming up to your data deadlines, or like it's the first term, the first half term, it's ridiculous, and it's just like trying to kind of get someone to wrap their head around at those times, just somehow a million times worse for work is
I mean you eventually notice kind of like the break points, don't you? That first week back, nobody wants to do anything or be thinking about anything other than work that first week back, and various aspects across the year, when you hit GCSEs, when you hit various times, that it's going to crunch. But I think it becomes overly hard to manage, I think, and manage your time. Eventually I did get much better at it, over time. I don't tend to work past 5 now. I tweet past 5.
Yeah, that's really good.
I'll tweet past 5, and I tweet about education stuff past 5, but I won't work. I won't work. If it will not fit between 9 through to 5, because I'm autistic and I've got ADHD, the downtime is so important because it prevents burnout. So I cannot afford to do it. So
do you feel like you're actually more productive in that time as well because you've limited yourself? Because I think that does actually help, because you're a lot less obviously tired. You haven't got that burnout feeling. You're in the perfect position to be able to do your best work.
And I'll show you, hit tips for both of us. This is the first week. The first week's back in January, so we're in planning stages now, and this is mine hung up on the wall of things Caroline needs to do list. So I'll make a direct list. This is my husband's to-do list. Do you know what I mean? And basically we make 2 big lists that we put on kind of note and clipboards so we can see them, and then we basically keep them in the office, and then it goes on the list, and then things get ticked off the list as they're done, and then when they are done, the list gets put down, and if the list is down, you don't think about it, you don't go back to it, you don't pick it up, you don't do anything with it, because it then restricts the time. And you don't have this thing, I think, with me where, or anybody else like me, where things mull around in your head and you worry that you've forgotten them. Do you know what I mean? And you worry you're not going to do them. Or did I do that? Or I can't remember whether I did that. Or no, it goes on the list. When the list is empty, you write the new list. So that's it. That's it. That's the method.
That's very true.
And we have and I'll tweet it later, we have a very big family planning board in the hall that is incredibly structured for everybody in the house, and basically consists of one like giant like whiteboard planner with dates, and then a to-do list for Kaz that says Kaz Monday through Friday, and then Aurora Monday through Friday, because there's 2 ADHDs in the house, and then basically has the things that need done, so that when we see them on a regular basis, so we don't forget them. So that's how I knew I had our meeting today.
And also you get that feeling where you get to tick it off and be able to say, to
I'm
your
done
brain,
with that.
like it's done, like physically done.
It's done. You don't have to do that anymore. And also
I find this helpful for that, definitely.
I'll tweet it so you can see it. But also because then I don't have to continuously think about it. Because every time I walk past the board, it's like, oh, that is there. I wrote that down. I don't have to think about this anymore.
You don't have to think about it. It's there when you need to look at it.
It's there when I need to look at it. And it as well for me, because I forget things all the time. If I don't have to worry that all of that is retained within me, because then everybody in the house checks the board. So on a Sunday there comes this conversation where it's like, what's going on this week? And then it's like, this week we are doing da 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 da, and whatever's on the board gets then shoved into, mostly my other half's brain, or, somebody's, and then everybody reminds each other every day what's going on today. So then that way you're not kind of dropping the ball, but it means that when we come in, we have an instant routine of you put on your slippers when you come in, and then once they're on, The rest of the world does not exist. That's it. It's gone.
That's it.
It's gone. Slippers are on your feet. The day is over.
That sounds good. Great.
And I think that's helped me manage and divide the line between work and life. Because for me, it's very easy for me to, you know, and it's unfortunately easy, I guess, for me to get like into doing something, you know. I'll be into like planning this module that, you know, I'm doing, or planning this computer thing I'm doing coming up, or planning, you know, a whole bunch of work for, you know, when I'm going into schools, or planning stuff for my PhD and I'm sat there coding, and I'll come upstairs to, this is my home office, but I'll come upstairs to it, or I'll go into my office at the university, or I'll go into school. And I'll start, and then 15 hours later, I'll finish. And it's like, and I did it a couple of weeks back ago when I was working on something. I got promptly told off, because it was like, I started it, and then I started the work, and then I got in the flow of it. So then it was like, I'll carry on. But then I stood up, and I'd forgotten that I was sat. I tend to sit in a position with my leg underneath my foot. And I've been sat on my leg.
Do your pins and needles.
And I stood up and fell over.
Oh.
And then Mark was like, did you like sit there for like that whole time, Kaz? And I was like, because I left you at 7 and it's now like 9 p.m. And I was like, yes. And he was like, did you eat? And I was like, no. And he was like, did you go to the bathroom? And I was like, I can't remember. I don't think I did. And he was like, oh, just... which is why for me it's specifically, but I think they apply generally to everybody. You know, you get into the zone and you start work. Sometimes you can just carry on and carry on and carry on and carry on, because the work is endless in teaching. You know, next thing you know.
And I think it's because it's never finished, is it? There's always something to do. So sometimes it's very hard to be able to just say that's enough. And
I think sometimes you can do it, and you do it, you know, a lower version. All neurotypicals feel things that that's a timer on your phone that basically lets you grow little trees. So you get to grow little trees if you do an hour's work. So you get a tree that grows over the hour, but then at the end of the hour it stops you. And then it's like, oh, okay, so you can just keep track of how long you've been on things. And actually it's really not good to be kind of like... So I'm stopping you there. I've just tweeted out that app and a few polls to ask us a few questions regarding, you know, what's going on with teaching and your personal relationships. So, you know, if you want to go check them out, you can do. And we're just going to go to the news before we go back to me and Kat discussing how to manage that workload the best that you can.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Strike action dominates the news again, with a range of outlets reporting on disputes across England, Wales and Scotland. Whilst the NASUWT union reported 9 out of 10 teachers who voted in a ballot over pay voted in favour of strike action in England and Wales, the union also reported only a 42% turnout. This is below the threshold needed for lawful strike action. The union stated that whilst a strike would now not go ahead, the union remains in formal dispute with the government. The NEU is yet to release the results of its ballot and will also need to reach the 50% member turnout needed for lawful industrial action. In Scotland, the Scottish Secondary Teachers Association has warned of further strike action following walkouts by primary and secondary staff. It says it has no option unless the Scottish Government puts forward a suitable pay offer. The EIS union and Scottish NASUWT members also aim to continue with strike action until an agreement is reached. Scottish Education Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville maintains that the demand for a 10% pay rise continues to be unaffordable. Meanwhile, the University and College Union has announced 15 new strike days planned across 150 UK universities in February and March. It has said that a pay offer worth between 4 and 5% made during recent talks is not enough, although the group representing university employers says that the offer is actually worth up to 7%. This comes after the government announced that tuition fees in England will be frozen for another 2 years. Although this is good news for students, the strikes mean more disruption to courses already affected by the pandemic. However, the National Union of Students has been broadly supportive of the industrial action, at least so far. Away from strike action, there have been further stories focusing on what should be taught in schools. This time, the focus is on educating pupils in the dangers of social media in spreading messages that are misogynistic and deeply toxic. The HuffPost website reports on Labour MP Alex Davies-Jones, who called in Parliament for ministers to do more to stamp out Andrew Tate-style misogyny and to stop boys being brainwashed. The MP asked what was being done to tackle radicalisation of young men, but PM Rishi Sunak responded that he was proud that this government launched the world-leading, world-first online safety bill. He also made reference to the autumn statement announcement of £2 billion of extra funding to schools. Although he did not respond with any direct reference to Tate, the online safety bill is expected to complete its final stages in the Commons shortly, before heading to the House of Lords. New figures released recently show that school absences in December were almost double the annual rate, and that this was due to illness. The absence rate, as reported in the Evening Standard, was 14.3% across state schools in the week beginning December the 12th, an increase from 7.8% across the year. The Department for Education in England said the increase was due to a rise in sick days as a result of winter illnesses such as flu, as well as COVID-19 and strep A infections such as scarlet fever. In the Channel Island of Jersey, BBC News reports that the government has brought in 11 UK supply teachers to cover for absent staff. The short-term and long-term measures have been put in place due to staffing shortages, and the supply teachers will cover for up to 2 terms. Short-term housing has been organised for those travelling to the island. The Jersey government said the current vacancy rate for Jersey was 4.3%, but that the long-term plan was to train, recruit, retain and upskill school staff. Finally, the Meanwhile in the Middle East section of the CNN website reports on the United Arab Emirates' plan to become the first Arab nation to teach about the Holocaust in its schools. The move has been praised by some and criticised by others. The nation revealed its plans in a recent tweet and intends to include Holocaust education in both primary and secondary schools. The UAE says it will work with Tel Aviv and Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Jerusalem, to help build the new curriculum. Whilst many see the move as part of the normalisation of relations with Israel, critics suggest that it does not reflect all of those living in the UAE, with many disagreeing with this policy. Full details of the story can be found on the CNN website, with comments on both sides explored in detail. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, let's start the new year with investigating the power of artificial intelligence in education. A lot of people are asking, does your school block ChatGPT? First of all, what is it? Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer, or GPT for short, is a piece of software designed to mimic talking to a person. The difference is, this person is super clever, and it's been trained by thousands of conversations in the past, and it remembers them all. There are lots of chatbots out there. GPT is popular with young people as the answers it gives are not only correct, but can be slightly different each time, so it's more difficult for a teacher to spot a copy and paste homework. Let's put it to the test with a couple of school questions. I'm using a screen reader to represent ChatGPT to give it a voice. Responses are usually in text and appear as if they're being typed really quickly. I asked, what are the registers in a processor? And I got...
Registers are a type of memory that is built into the central processing unit, CPU of a computer. They are used to store data and instructions that the CPU needs to access quickly in order to perform its functions. There are different types of registers, each with a specific purpose. For example, the instruction register stores the current instruction that the CPU is executing, while the program counter register stores the address of the next instruction to be executed.
I'll stop GPT there, as 3 paragraphs were given in this answer and it's only a 1 or 2 mark question. So I asked, can you tell me in 2 sentences? And I got...
Registers are small, high-speed memory units built into the central processing unit, CPU, of a computer that are used to store data and instructions. They allow the CPU to access and manipulate data and instructions quickly, enabling it to carry out complex tasks at high speeds.
Well, thank you, GPT. That's much more to the point. Powerful, right? How about, can you summarise Of Mice and Men?
Of Mice and Men is a novella by John Steinbeck, published in 1937. It tells the story of George Milton and Lenny Small, 2 displaced migrant ranch workers during the Great Depression in California. Despite their apparent differences, the 2 men are deeply bonded and rely on each other for companionship and support. The novella ends tragically when Lenny, a simple-minded man with a love for soft things, accidentally kills a ranch owner's wife while trying to touch a soft dress, and George is forced to make the difficult decision to euthanize Lenny before he can be punished for the crime.
That's fantastic. However, there's some words in there that are quite big, and my teacher would be quite suspicious that I copied and pasted it. So I'll ask, can you summarise Of Mice and Men simply?
Of Mice and Men is a story about 2 ranch workers, George and Lenny, who are traveling together and looking for work during the Great Depression. Lenny is a large, simple-minded man with a love for soft things, and George is his caretaker and protector. Despite their differences, the 2 men are deeply bonded and rely on each other for companionship and support. However, their relationship is ultimately tested when Lenny accidentally kills a ranch owner's wife, and George is forced to make a difficult decision to protect Lenny from the consequences of his actions.
That's more like it. Now my homework's done, I think I just bought myself some more time on my games console. As always, I'd love to hear what you want to know about tech. Let us know at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hi, welcome back. We are currently in a conversation with Kat Cauchi from Rise Magazine and Net Support, and we're talking about personal relationships and the effect that teaching has on them. So we were just at the point in the conversation, this one's a pre-recorded one for me, to discussing how you can manage, or tricks you can use to manage the way that you go out with your teaching schedules. And I was talking about a little app that you can use. I've just tweeted it out to be able to manage how long you've been sat working. I think we all do that, don't we? So you sit down to do some marking and then you look up and it's been like 5 hours. So we're just going to pick the conversation up there. So messages or answer some of the polls that we've got out there, or if you're on catch up, I think they're still probably out there on TT Radio. So let's have a listen and see where we're at. Especially if you're a teacher, if you sat down marking, or you're doing, all of your data, and you've been there 5 hours after your full day of teaching, just to keep track of how long you've been there. Because I think that's one of the worst things that we do. I don't think it's necessarily the hours we teach. I mean, did you see that in the research? Was it much more the hours that are planning and less the hours in front of kids?
Yeah, it was definitely not the actual time where you're actually teaching. It was all of the kind of other aspects. So it was the planning, the data, resources, like everything that is outside of those school hours was the main problem. And what really worried me is the lack of support that the teachers felt they had from their actual schools. So, so over half of them said they don't feel they have any support from their schools that helps them specifically with their relationships, by either helping them with their mental health or well-being. So that's really concerning. And obviously you've shared some really great advice, but those are all like your own tips. And I feel like there are that schools aren't really kind of sharing their ways to do it. I know Alistair was saying that when he was sharing his advice, Alistair Bailey, you know him, I think you spoke. I'm sure that when you spoke with Jez, you spoke about Alistair Bailey, he works with UHQ. He was saying that how schools have got to help, like with healthy boundaries. They have to help teachers establish those boundaries. Because once they've kind of shared all those ways and they stop kind of rewarding them having unhealthy boundaries, then that will make a really big impact as well.
It's not a great example, is it really?
No.
I mean, I'm all about the example, and it's not really a great one. I don't think for us to be setting for each other or setting for kids. To have this. I mean, this report, as I said, it's shocking in places, guys. So you really do want to read it. Some of the lack of support is profound. But I get that from personal experience when you're having a hard patch in a personal relationship, or your marriage has collapsed, or things have been particularly difficult, or your relationships come to an end, or something drastic's happened. My husband had a heart attack in my first years of teaching, and I remember quite significantly ringing and taking a few days off. But I was there during that, so I gave CPR. He's obviously fine. He had a stent put in, but it didn't just shake me. It really got me, like really severely. And we'd been married all of 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness, that's so.
Yeah, it was. It was quite shocking. Don't get me wrong, guys. I don't always have this tragic life. Sometimes I give these stories and people are like, "Oh my God, that's so shocking." But like, my life isn't all tragedy. But I'm just very honest and open with it. Yeah, I'm very open and honest with it, as you know. And I remember about a week later, a teacher asked me whether my husband was okay to carry on, considering to do what do I want to say? The parental boards that we have. Oh, you know what? It's gone from my mind now because I got upset about that. You know what I mean? Was he okay to do school governor?
Yeah.
That was what they said.
Not is he actually okay?
No.
Yeah.
Could he still do school governor? And I was like, no. No. He is in the hospital.
Why would you even ask that? That's what's the problem is that would even be a factor that they would.
No,
it
was that, and obviously for me, I'm quite blunt and frank. So I came home and I was like, oh my God. And at the time I was at home on my own because my daughter was in Iceland, my husband was in hospital, and it was just me. And it was like, oh my God. And I'm sat there thinking to myself, did somebody just really ask me that? Really? And then later on.
How can you, in that environment, feel able to talk to them about how you're feeling and what you need if they obviously don't take it seriously?
I just couldn't in the end. I just couldn't in the end. And to be honest, it was a horrible period of my life, and it was a bad patch, and it was literally. I just couldn't even express like how devastated I was at the time. And to be honest, on top of that, as I said, when later on it became obvious that I'm autistic and ADHD, then it became very clear why I'd coped so profoundly badly during that time, because it's a very, very hard thing for any autistics and ADHDs to deal with. It becomes just too overwhelming for us. And I just sat there and thought, where's this? And it was at that moment.
Where was the support?
Where's the support? And about 6 months later, the Department for Education came along and shut my brand new school and announced that they were building a new school elsewhere. So we were all being made redundant. And it was around about then that I thought, I'm not sure anybody cares about me here. And honest to God, if it wasn't for the school that I moved to, I would have continued to think that. And
the environment is so big, and it's not to say that there are schools that are doing really great things. Absolutely, it's more just that we're concerned that we're seeing such a high amount that aren't doing those things for their staff. And I'd love people to share what they are doing that is actually helping, foster these relationships.
I'll say that one of the things that helped me during that patch was I had an epic two department heads who were phenomenal, and just held my hand all the way through. And I honestly think that I wouldn't have carried on in teaching without them. I had a great head at the time. And it was like, that made such a difference, being heard, being listened to, being just like, what would you need? How do I support you through this? Those kinds of things matter, I think. And I think too often how do I want to say this? Because I've seen great examples and bad ones, but too often I think, sometimes we shy away from personal conversations about how our teachers' personal lives are going. And we avoid it because it doesn't seem professional. But to be honest, sometimes I think that they really do need to just talk about their lives. And much later on, I took on an NQT. When I was by that time I was far higher up, and I took on an NQT, and he suffered quite severe anxiety, I've had a few who've suffered quite severe anxiety, but this was bad. And the school that I was in just didn't suit him at the time. We were trying to push through, so requires improvement up to good. I knew full well that the kind of pressures that was going to take wasn't going to be good for him. So I helped him reorganise to move to a school that was in a good position to support him. And it felt like a hard choice, but it felt like the choice that kept him in teaching.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I didn't think he deserved to continue to try and burn himself out and be that anxious and that upset. And I just sat there and said, you know what? You need to find somewhere like this that is better suited to you at this moment. You need a lot of support right now. And, I'm glad to say that he's still in teaching. He's become a brilliant teacher. But I think sometimes just saying either, a change of school will do good if you really can't make it work, or a step back, or to supply, or to move to other choice. You don't have to always leave. Or just sometimes just to say, I'm going to take a break from it for 12 months and see how I feel.
I think it's normalising that is okay as well, like you said earlier, that, those choices are fine and that you can carry on working in education in lots of different ways.
Oh, loads of different
shouldn't
ways.
have that guilt attached to
If you come out and you don't fancy it, then you can find lots of other ways to work within and around it. That's fine. But I think we've got to get away from this kind of it feels as if there's almost a shame that you're not. I mean, seriously, get over it. If we want more people to stay in teaching, we've got to move away from that.
Absolutely.
And I think, to be honest, when you talk about these things, it just does become profound how hard it is for teachers to cope. Maybe we should be having more boundaries, more guidance, not just for kind of well-being, like how are you eating, here's a yoga class. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it needs to be ingrained in the school culture, not just kind of those sort of tokenistic things.
Yeah, maybe we should have more conversations about how are you managing, your home life, how are you managing your relationships. I mean, I don't know about you. What do you think about this one? I mean, as I said, guys, do read the report. But how do you find friendships in teaching? God. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm on the spectrum, so I find it hard anyway. But, I found it near impossible because it was you'd have the priorities where it'd be especially if you've got a family, your family and your partner, and teaching ends up at the top of the pile. Then your partner and your family end up the next in the pile.
Yeah.
So then your friends become the very bottom of the pile. And before you know it, you look around and you're like me, where your husband's just had a heart attack and you sat there on your own thinking, where did everybody go? And it's I had to ring my mother. Don't worry, I got looked after well. But it's
No, I know what you mean though. It's very true, and it feels like your friends end up being people that you only see during the holidays, except not really because they're working during the holidays, so it doesn't quite pan out.
You don't get to see them in the week because you're too busy, and if it's in term time, you're too exhausted to do weekends. Forget that kind of let's go out on Saturday night. You've really got to gear yourself up to that. You've got to you've got to have at least 2 month notice before it even happens. And then,
but it's interesting because so I was asked to Bailey again, clinical psychologists were saying that you need to develop reasons to stop working. So stuff like that would be good for stopping working, but you just feel too tired to be able to do that. So it becomes a sort of vicious cycle.
Yeah. So, and I do think that, and even when you do, so you get the breaks, so half of the half terms, let's face it, we're all sleeping, either sleeping, recovering, dying, or sick. Do you know what I mean? Or planning for the next term.
The amount of times you'd be ill as soon as we school holiday.
Yeah, like me, this seriously.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
You,
and I'm only spending a couple of days in school a month, but it got me anyway. And it's you're either sick. And then when you get to the summers, quite often I'd find, the first couple of weeks are spent just recovering. Then by the time you get to the stage where you want to, because you've got a bit of energy and maybe a little time and you could do it, either if you've got a family, you're trying to get away with your family to spend some time with them, or if you're trying to see your friends and people, but you're right, they're all in work, so you end up there's nobody there, and it's and then before you know it, you're into planning, and then you're back in. So I do feel like sometimes I found a lot of my friends have ended up being teachers.
Yeah.
Which then, I think, you talk about teaching. It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
oh.
I think you're right.
And it's like, why are we, I mean, don't get me wrong, I have some wonderful friends like you in teaching. I kind of like, or are ex-teachers or are around the teaching profession that I absolutely love, and they're brilliant and they're great to spend time with. But sometimes I wonder whether, you know, we do narrow our friendship groups down to other teachers, because they're the only ones we can kind of.
I think I've definitely got a lot closer to my like friends that haven't worked in teaching or anything like that since leaving, and I think that's just because of like scheduling and stuff, you know, being able to put work down and like finish work, so having more energy in the evenings and at weekends and stuff to see people. I think really that is what it is.
I think my my first year, even with, you know, jumping in and out a couple of days a month, you know, and keep in mind, you know, I was doing a PhD, so it's not exactly as if it's not intense. I had more time to see people, and more time to be able to look after myself. You know, I know that sounds awful when you know you say it, and it's like, you know, the most intensive academic thing you can professionally do feels less intense than teaching. It's like, and it does, and that is and I, you know, I can't. There's no way around that. You know, when I first stopped, I just finished my part-time master's, part-time teaching, and I decided to stop. And I decided to delay the start of my PhD. I could have started in the September, but I delayed it until the March to recover.
Yeah.
And I literally spent like 8 months doing very little. You know, I'd just been diagnosed. I needed 8 months to just sit there and be burnt out for a while. And I just, you know, for the first 2 months, I think I just slept. And it was like, you know, the exhaustion of continuously holding it up with no end in sight had kind of finally got to me, and I just made it over this kind of hump, and I thought I just need to stop and breathe for a second and reflect. I feel like sometimes we do our personal relationships because we don't get time to breathe or reflect on anything. I feel like it's always constantly putting out fires without quite the right equipment in it.
That's a really good point. I would be interested to know as well, actually, if it's so with kind of the negative impact on personal relationships, if it actually is more substantially when you're looking at like neurodivergent people as well, because obviously, you know, if you need more time, like you were saying, to be able to process things and stuff like that, it just feels like it's going to be so much harder to foster relationships. You know?
Yeah, I think it probably is. The answer you're probably going to get back, although please give us a shout, is probably a definitive yes. But that's why I think a lot of neurodivergent teachers do burn out. The rate of burnout is so high for us.
And it's a shame because they're the perfect role models for the many neurodivergent children in the school, you know. So
I know, and it's you know, we spend all this time desperately trying to accommodate neurodivergent children to get the best out of them, but we can't even accommodate our neurodivergent staff. You know, and that tells you, you know, I often say you're almost like the canary in the coal mine. If you're autistic, because if you find it hard, then you can guarantee everybody else is finding it hard. So you know, if I find a working environment too intensive, I know that everybody else is finding it too intensive too. It's just I'll find it too intensive earlier. Do you know what I mean? And it'll be harsher. The consequences will be more difficult. So you know, it makes me look at it and go, is this suitable?
There's an issue.
You know, there's an issue there. And I think
but they've done research, haven't they, though, that's shown that if you are supporting as much like kind of diversity as possible, if you're supporting like the kind of the more, whatever the most extreme kind of individual need within your workplace is, it benefits everyone.
Oh yeah. It's the same as like teaching SEND, isn't it? You know, you adapt your classrooms for them, it benefits everybody. So, you know, there's certain tactics you can put in that definitely benefit everybody through. What was the kind of advice that you ended up because you've got a little guidance here on, you know, what kinds of things you can do to try and, you know, manage your personal relationships a bit more and set those boundaries a bit better for teachers. So what kinds of things did you learn over this report that you thought, you know what, we should all be trying to do this?
Yeah, so are you thinking kind of like individuals or schools?
Schools in general, I think, because I think as individuals, we can all kind of reflect on our own individual
Yeah.
circumstances. But I think as
Absolutely.
schools, we do need to start thinking as a group. We talk about schools as communities all the time. In our community, we're not really looking after all of our community, are we?
No,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
We've got certain aspects of the community that we look after and the others that we don't. It's like, the old airline adage, put your face mask on before helping others. I think at the moment we're probably all starving of oxygen, but all our students are getting as much as they can. And I don't think that is sustainable.
True.
So, what do you think schools could do to change this obvious massive problem with teachers and managing their personal lives and managing their emotions within schools?
It really is. Yeah, I mean, there were like 77% that said that they have struggled or are struggling to manage their relationships while teaching, so that is huge. So with schools, there were quite a few things that came up. So one of the main things, like first of all, was that they need to actively monitor mental health, well-being, and stress. So actually being proactive about it, seeing what the factors are and addressing them. Having wellbeing policies that staff are actually involved in creating. Another huge one was ditching data-related performance targets. There are still far too many schools doing this, and it's just an extra accountability stress for teachers, and it's just not helpful, and it's not. Most of the time, it just doesn't make any sense because it's not about getting pupils. It shouldn't be about getting pupils to expected or whatever. It should be about helping that.
You'd be able to look at the kind of the detail in that, if you could answer it specifically, to be able to say, well, what did our teachers think would help them manage their personal relationships better? Is it that you just need, to be able to have, an area where they could go to have a bit more of a quiet break if they're just feeling like things are going well? Do they need a bit more time off to be able to go to their kids, parents' evening? I think Andrew Alan Zoo said it in your report.
Yeah, Alan talked about that, didn't he?
Yeah, just going to
really
their own child's, Christmas play. You know what I mean? You can't do it. And just having the time to be able to do those kinds of things, may make a better effect on your relationship. Because I think sometimes we don't break it down specifically. We just say, we need to talk about well-being, or like how we're going to get better. And it's like, no, that's not going to do anything. If it was a conversation that consisted of, we need to talk about how to best manage personal relationships, we teach personal relationships, guys. We do.
I know. You need to do it for the staff.
We do.
Kids.
We teach it to kids. So it's not
we need
like
to get those workload policies sorted out as well. Help get staff involved on ways to minimise work. And also we should be looking at other organisations. So we're not, teaching isn't the only profession that has a big emotional investment. There's lots of other public services that do, and yet they are managing things better when it comes to that kind of that cut off and those personal relationships. So you need to kind of look at that and see where things are working well.
Yeah, I think, to start rounding up, one of the things that I wished, and I'd said this with Teacher Toolkit when I talked to him, when we did our podcast on child abuse, I wish that they'd have more help within schools for the emotional load that it takes to deal with emotional cases. Because
that's really big. That's very big.
I just think sometimes, I'd have students and I'd see the circumstances, and being an abuse victim myself, it'd just be so upsetting for me. It'd knock me for months.
It is really hard.
And I think sometimes, even if you're not like, like me, but realistically, if you were just your average teacher, the emotional toll it can take on you dealing with a child in real need is hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't really talk about that. We talk about identifying, mental health and abuse and how to safeguard kids, but we don't really talk about where to get support if you're the teacher. And that, the amount of times that I've come home thinking about a kid, Do you know what I mean?
And you
Worried
can't talk about
kids,
it.
and I can't
So
talk
if
about
you had
it.
that support within school to be able to talk about how you're feeling, that would take a huge load off.
Yeah, you must have had that at some point where you started to think about a kid, and then you can't go and talk about it because that's
horrible.
Yeah, and you just got to sit with that. And then, you know, quite often if you're not safeguarding lead, you're not encouraged to talk about it. Yeah, you're not exactly encouraged to talk about it in a staff room, are you? So, so what you do is you just sit with it, and then eventually it just drives you insane until eventually you'll probably go to your safeguarding lead and say something like, "How's little Timmy doing? Because I've been really worried." But that's the only time you've said it. But instead you've sat with this thought for like, I've done it for like, 2 weeks, worrying about how that's going. And it's like, I've seen plenty of schools that have good policies on keeping the person informed so that they're not overly worrying. So that's a good thing.
I think that's really helpful.
And that
I do remember a conversation with a child once where I spoke to the safeguarding lead, and then I remember just crying in the corridor for like 10 minutes. I just couldn't. It was just,
And, we are seeing more. There's been a big uptick in mental health issues for our young people. We all know this. Everybody's felt it. And, a lot of our young people are struggling, and with the stresses on the NHS and social care, has virtually collapsed these days. CAMS is just not worth the paper it's written on most of the time. So, fundamentally, we're having to deal with more and more of that. More and more cases where we are the front line, more and more cases where we are the only one, more and more where young people, I've seen a few where young people are being referred to mental health services and told it's 6 months, it's 8 months, it might be, longer than that, and waiting. I'm pretty sure every teacher has had that moment of having to wait around for somebody to help their student. And when you're the teacher in front of them, you're trying your best. And, I don't think we have enough emotional support there. I think it's
we don't.
We're just trying to be everything and anything at the moment, between feeding them for, food banks, looking after their mental health.
Exactly.
And I can understand why that then has this knock-on effect in our own personal lives. And there's a lot in teaching that just can rattle around in your head.
Not leaving room for anyone else
sometimes. No, not at all. And then, as I said, you're right, you can't really talk then. So, I'd point out that there's some good services I've used, things like the Education Support Network, or love them. They've seen me through, at least. It's a free phone number, guys, if you're ever in need. They've seen me through a few I'm about to have a complete nervous breakdown and need to leave teaching moments, or moments where I've just thought I can't go on. So, they've been really good. But, there's other places you can definitely go to get this kind of support, haven't you? So you've got a little suggested list of some things to do, haven't you, in your little guide, from a psychologist and therapists in there. Just making sure that you can get as much healthy living in there. If you go check the guide, then it's in it. And ways and tips in which you can get there, you got from Alistair at UHQ, and a lot of teachers have recommended a few bits. But if there was a main point for things you would like teachers to start doing about maintaining the personal relationships and the mental health within schools, what do you think it would be after you've wrote this report? What's one thing we could all start doing that would at least try and take the edge off this? Because you're quite right in saying this is a damning conclusion, reading this.
Huge.
But after doing this, it's a brilliant report, by the way, Kat, congratulations on it. But after doing it, what would you want us all to start doing?
I think for us all, kind of as individuals, I think the key thing would be about communication, which it sounds really simple, but it's just making it clear to those people that are in your life, in your personal relationships, what is going on with you and why you are maybe behaving the way that you are, like recognizing your behaviors of stress or depression, and speaking to them about it. Because otherwise you do have this thing where the people in the relationship feel powerless. They don't know if they're what's causing you upset or stress. They want to help, they don't know how. So I think just trying to maintain that communication with them of, look, I've just had a really rubbish day. at school, I need to just be left alone for half an hour. I need complete silence or whatever it is you need. So I think just being more clear about communicating how we're feeling and what we need, which I know is difficult, but I think would have a much more positive effect on our relationship.
I think you're right. I think it's critical. If you're like me and you're neurodiverse, I have a big giant wheel that's up in my kitchen that has a big sign that says "I feel," that helps me distinguish how I feel on a regular basis, which I will tweet for everybody to go be like, "Oh yes, that's how we do that." That helps me just distinguish the one feeling from another, so that I'm kind of like, if I'm stressed, I know I'm stressed and not actually just annoyed, or it's just a sensory issue or something else is going on. It just helps me figure it out so I can communicate articulately, because quite often I think you can very much struggle to do that. Everybody can struggle to, especially if you're under the pressure, to struggle to communicate how you're feeling about things in school. But I think you're right. I think that would be the key one. Also, I'd like to encourage everybody to go read Kat's report. It's out in Rise this week, isn't it? So when's the launch date of it? Is it today or tomorrow?
Yeah, so it is out today. So you can find it if you go to, let me find what the link was. So it's netsupportsoftware.com / I'm pretty sure it's relationships report, but it's not loading for me right now.
We'll get that.
Just typical.
We'll get that link out and make sure that everybody's got it. So I'll tweet it out as we're using it.
But research report.
Yeah, so it's the new research one from Net Support, and this has been lovely talking to you, Kat. I think you've made such a contribution with this. It's such a good report to read, hoping that it highlights a need for us to all start talking about our lives, not just in teaching but outside of teaching.
I hope it sparks some changes within schools as well. I think it's so critical, and it's going to make, I think it'll make a really big impact for retention for schools as well. So it is a win-win situation, really.
Yes, and we definitely need all the help we can get on retention, or just making sure teachers are happy and can stay. So I really think it's a crucial one. So please, everybody, read it. I'm going to let you go, Kat. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It was lovely to talk to you.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks. So that was Kat Cauchi talking about personal relationships today. So as I've done this on pre-recorded, I've been tweeted a fair bit, been going along. So please do let us know if you want to contribute something to the tweets. But we've had quite a few. I've put up a few polls to see what kind of things we're all thinking as teachers on this. More ideas than merrier was talking about the idea of taking flexible breaks from teaching and returning to teaching, or this idea of taking a break and then coming back to teaching. They said, I think to keep energized and keep the balance, a break or a part-time role can help. Sometimes it's possible in the FE industry to link up with the industry you've worked in or are working in, but not always, because it can keep people energized and up to speed with current processes. So, if you're a teacher that's took a break and then gone to work with industry, or gone part-time and done a bit of work with industry, let Teach Talk Radio know. Let us know how that's worked for you. Also on that flexible working model, Ian Timbrell was saying, I'm doing exactly that right now. My school, LE and governing body was really supportive, but it's not something that's done standard, so there were a lot of hoops for everybody to jump through. It's so common in other professions that it could help with the retention crisis. So there's lots of thoughts going around on this, on what kinds of things can we do to support teachers, not only in their personal relationships, but also in their workload? So if you're a teacher out there and you've got some tips and tricks for managing that workload, or emotionally or physically supporting your teachers in schools, at TT Radio, and let us know, and we'll get those kind of tweeted out. You can have a look at some of the polls that we've got. I've let them to run to a day, so they're interesting ones for us to reflect on as a profession. I've got a few questions out there for neurodiverse teachers, for Senkos, on our friendships and teaching. Have you got enough time to see and socialise with your friends? I know in teaching it can be tough. So, these are the kind of conversations I think Teach Talk Radio can can facilitate, and all of us can have and talk about these kinds of things. Even if it's just answer one of the anonymous polls that's out there, you can find them on @TT Radio right now. Thank you so much for listening today, and hopefully I'll be back soon. But basically, if you're a teacher and you're struggling, please do reach out, talk. My DMs are pretty always open, so if you want to have a chat privately, or if you want to raise an issue, or have a moment where you suggest something that the show could talk about, please let us know. And I'm looking forward to listening back and seeing all your tweets come out, and hopefully have some suggestions on what ways we can improve our personal lives. Because obviously our lives personally are just as important as our professional. If you've got a personal life that's in balance, then your professional life's going to work well too. We probably really need to take care of our teachers, personal and professional lives, and that balance, and maybe a bit more if we're going to really address the teacher retention crisis that we're seeing right now. So thank you so much. And I'll look forward to hearing from you soon. You'll be able to get this on catch up. Thanks. Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.